All right, so before I start, does anybody have any questions? Are you guys all good?
No.
Everybody good? So we're going on to education and religion. We'll more likely get through the education aspects tonight, and then we on Tuesday we'll hit up the um, I can't even think the religion portion. I love the way how they kind of put these two together because they really don't go hand in hand. But I didn't write the book. So when we're looking at this, when we're looking at education from a global perspective, when did education become a requirement? Does anybody know? Like, when did you have to have a diploma to work at McDonald's, right? So that when you were looking at education and industrialization, you had this credential of society. They put into place to where you had to have credentials, high school diploma or certificate saying that you completed school in order to basically evaluate to say that you're able to work or to say that you're able to do some type of a aspects in regards to a job wise. However, if you look at it on a technical aspects, does it take a lot when it comes to working in a fast food restaurant? Do you really need a high school diploma for that?
I've always thought no, but I'm not for sure.
Not anymore, right?
Mhm.
In regards to what's required and what's not required. But if you think about it, they got to have some type of a minimal understanding in regards for calculations for society communication purposes, vocabulary wise. You got to have some type of a standard in there. But if you think about it, I remember when I was in school, that was like your stepping stone. That was your experience. Get into a fast food restaurant, and that was to get you your foot into a job related type experience, to get the understanding of how real life is supposed to be. No, uh, by all means, that doesn't work that way. But as we've industrialized and we've moved through our transitions and stuff like that, education is now mandatory. Back in the early 1900s, education was not mandatory. If you got through the sixth grade, you were considered knowledgeable and educated enough to maintain a job and work. I cannot imagine some of our sixth graders, no offense, I love our kids to death, but I cannot imagine some of the sixth graders that are floating around working at McDonald's. Not going to happen, right? Um, but it's the expansion. It's the expansion of education that needs to kind of happen. And how do we expand it? How do we become this industrialization basically in regards to our education? Your book had this lovely picture here. The main purpose of early education was to Americanize. It was to basically get everybody socialized, how to be an American type aspects. But in 1926, 90% of the students were immigrants. So, and I know you guys have heard me say this before, what's Americanization? You see on this, you see Greek, you see German, you see Mexico, you see, whatever it may be. How is a class even taught? Was English really their first language?
No.
Yeah.
No. And nowadays and you hear this a lot in societies. Oh, you live in America, speak English. Uh, know your facts. you know, know the true history of our lifestyles. I mean, this is a perfect example. We all didn't come from America. I mean, yeah, globally wise, we've came from different aspects, but we weren't all born here in the U.S. We've all had to migrate. The history of our migration, our immigration is, I'm sure there's a long tail in regards to it. So when we're looking at it, and we want to mandatory the education, like I said, you have a nice wide range of students here. I would probably say from about first to all the way to 12th that
Mhm.
were in one class together. There was no separation of classes. Now look what you have. You have TK, pre-TK, kindergarten, you have first grade, second grade, third grade, whatever it may be now, all the way through. It's not one of those standards in regards to, you know, here's your classroom, have fun. You know, I look at this picture and I think of, and it's bad to say if you guys have never watched Little House on the Prairie, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you got, right?
Mhm.
And you can even use that as a perfect example in regards to education was not mandatory back then. If you were able to sustain and get a job and work, and no one was expected to, get an education, you were expected to work. It was the opposite back in the earlier times. But now, as we're, like I said, we're progressing and we're going through, community colleges have opened up a wider and higher education aspects, right, for millions of students. It kind of gives them a stomping ground to start. Instead of the jumping straight from one to the another, of like from high school to a four-year university, a lot of individuals, and I've seen it within my own family, have a hard time with the transitionings. um, not only the cost is expensive, and I can vouch for that. I got student loans too, guys. But it's one of those situations to where I started just where you guys are at. I started at VBC. I started there, got my feet wet, kind of went, and traveled through and wanted to see what I wanted to do. Took this class, took that class, found an interest, took off and went. um, when you're 18, do you really know what you want to do?
No.
Think about it.
Right.
It's one of those situations where I remember when I was 18, I had other priorities at the time, but at the same time, I mean, I didn't know what I want. I'm still playing the field. I have two careers. I'm playing with both of them, so it's kind of one of those situations. It's like, well, have I really made up my mind in regards to my career? No, I'm still playing with them. But I've got my I've got, in regards to degree wise, I've made up my own mind. But as into what one I prefer more over the other, that's where I'm still kind of teeter tottering. So, it's the distant, obviously, we're at the distant learning aspects. We've lost our face to face aspects. But what's the difference when we're looking at globally and we're looking at education wise and the achievements across globally? This is just US wise. And if you see high school, or higher graduates are now, or high school or higher, and then it says college graduates. But if you look at it, look at the trend, it's higher and higher. There's a purpose behind that. What's that purpose? Does anybody know? How hard is it to say I don't want a diploma now?
To say what?
How hard is it to say I don't want a diploma? I don't
Oh,
want a high
it's not
school
hard at
degree.
all.
You know,
It's easy.
it's pretty easy. However, what forces the kids, or what's the dedication to those kids to continue and get a degree now, or a high school diploma? Not so much a degree.
Uh, Well, to get even a small decent job, you need to have your high school diploma.
That
We
is
need,
it's a requirement in a lot of
yeah,
places.
yeah, and it's to the point where an achievement.
Hmm.
It's just something that is mandatory.
It's a
That you
keyword.
get it,
It's
even
almost
though
like
some
it's
of them,
expected.
you know, yeah.
You used to. They don't do them anymore. I know a few years ago when my kids were still in school, um, they had the exit exams.
Yeah,
If you didn't pass the exit exam, you didn't graduate.
right.
And that exit exam, believe it or not, was only to a sixth grade equivalent test. Believe it or not. And the kids were having a hard time passing it. So what they did, they kind of discontinued it. They call it another state test now, but they're still able to graduate whether if they pass it or not. But if you think about it, time you're a senior, you're done. You're checked out. It's your
Mhm.
fun year. You don't want to do any more testing. You don't want to do anything of that aspects anymore. You want to be able to relax, have fun, hang out with your friends, do all the fun activities, prom, senior ditch day, this day, that day, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
You're the cool one on the campus. You've earned those rights. But it's the key word there was mandatory. It is a mandatory requirement because now if you don't attend school, your parents are on the hook. You know, they're called star systems now, and if you have X amount of tardies or if you have X amount of non-excused days, uh, there could actually be a fee and a fine your parent would have to pay, or even to the point of possible jail time, depending on how neglected you are to showing up. There's a purpose behind it, and what's that purpose? The schools get paid for every student that is in there. That's how they get their funding. So there's a purpose behind making sure the kids stay in school and get their diplomas, and it all has to come back down to economics and money wise.
I have a question. You mentioned that the parents are responsible or there is a fine. Now, once that child is 18 and maybe he or she has not graduated high school as of yet, are they still responsible for that child?
Yes and no.
Yes, no?
Technically they're an adult because they are the age of 18
Mhm.
and they have their legal rights to do it. However, if there's documentation not stated that that child's allowed to make their own decisions,
Mm.
parents are still on the hook
Mm.
because technically they're in school until an X amount of day.
Okay.
I fell into that aspects as well when it came down to it because I turned 18 in January and I was like, peace, I could do whatever I want. You can't tell me what I can and can't do, you know?
Mm.
So it was like one of those things, but yet you still have 6 more months left of school. Can't tell me what to do. I had that mentality. I had that really bad adolescent 18, you can't tell me what to do. And at that time, the way I looked at it, I was already a parent on top of it. So I really had it really bad. But when you're looking at globally education, the most industrial, like with us, with here, we don't have to take entrance exams. Did you have to take any exam to get into VVC? Do you have to take any exams to get
Yeah.
into Cal State San Bernardino, Cal State Fullerton?
I haven't been there yet, so I don't know.
Did you guys hear that?
No.
The UCCs were, they used to require you guys to have like a SAT score or some type of a stat score before you enter the college. They're discontinuing that, and we get into that. By all means, we get into that in here. But the thing is that if you think globally wise, like Japan, they have to take entrance exams in order to get into a college. If they don't score high enough, they don't get into a college. What they do, they end up going to like a trade school types aspects in regards to how they tested, and that's what they get put into for a job.
Mm. Okay.
And so unlike us, we could kind of pick and choose, I want to go here, I'm going to go here, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to go. They don't have that. So in order to ensure that they score high enough, they have these, they call cram school courses. So these kids, as you can see, I mean, it kind of looks like us right now with COVID-19 with the face mask on. This is normal for them, guys. That's their normal everyday life, wearing face mask. We're like, oh my gosh, this is our new lifestyle, by the way, too. Get used to it. But when you're looking at it, they go to school all day, and then after school they go to this cram course to learn even more, to ensure that when they go to take these exams and they go to take these tests, that they're testing so high to the point to where it makes it a challenge in regards to they're all scoring so high. So what separates them?
Mm.
What do you have to offer? And if you've ever been in a job interview, you might hear them say, what do you have to offer us?
Mm.
I mean, how do you answer that question? What's your strengths, with your weaknesses?
Mhm.
If you've ever had to like analyze yourself, it's hard, but here's a big classroom. How do you separate yourself from everybody in there to say that you're different and that you deserve to go to college? Right? So, that's how they do their stuff. Um, for the most part, it's very time consuming. It's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of, their education systems there are crazy. they're all about education. We're here, we're a little bit more lax and kind of say, if you decide to go, then go. If you don't, you don't, but your pay kind of comes out with it too. But for them, if they don't have that education, it's very hard for them to find work, because then they end up more into trade aspects, and then it's just whatever. So we're looking at education and industrialization in nations like Russia. Under the Soviet Union, they had strict and follow the same state curriculum across the country. So they had identical. So like with us, like California has their own curriculum. If you go to Kansas, they have their own. If you go to Texas, they have their own. They don't have the same curriculum back and forth. Yeah, you have your standards that you're expected to know, your reading, your writing, and your math. Um, but for the most part, as when it comes to the state curriculums, it's staggered throughout the U.S. Whereas the Soviet Union, it was the same across education of science and math, nothing else of critical thinking. Why do you think that is? Why would there be no critical thinking? Only science and math. And we're talking Soviet Union, Russia time.
Because basically they want them to follow their rules and regulations and not to have their own sort of interest or their own thought process. In
No
other words,
opinions,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, in other words, people would ask questions. And why don't they want people to ask questions? What type of a state is it, or what type of country is it? Talked about politics.
More of dictatorship, sort
There
of.
you go.
Mm.
There are dictatorship aspects, right? So therefore, they don't want you to critically think. They don't want you to question. Know the basics, science, math, nothing more. Right? Um, so that's more of the communist type aspects, in regards to that. The capitalism, it's for profit, private property, personal freedom brought a change to the education. Um, private schools, those don't even run to the full extent of public schools. They kind of run off of their own kind of system as well. They still do the state requirements, but they'll tend to have that hidden curriculum in there as well in regards to teaching other things. It might be religion. It might be, some type of other aspects depending on what type of a private school it is. The birth of the private schools, religion. Um, the foreign run schools, the only issue is when you're looking at like the education from like the foreign education like Russia and stuff like that, there's low wages. So wages are pretty low. Um, the current situation and some of the living standards and living conditions in some of those areas, still low wages for teachers as well. And when it comes to the Russian aspects, they did the glorification of Russian history and only Russian history. Like I mentioned, I taught over at the high school a couple of years ago, taught the same sociology class, and it was weird because I'm like, not thinking, mentioned 9/11, and I'm like, oh geez, like deer in headlights. I'm like, did I say something? It's not in their history books.
Right.
If you really think about it, and I laugh about it because I still have this book, and I took Communications 105 here at VVC, and I ended up having to read a book called The Lies My Teachers Told Me. I still have that book. Um, but it's one of those situations that it went from, the history, politics, just all the different aspects in regards to the things that we do not teach our kids because we are afraid of backlash, you know, of what might come out about it, And then in this aspects, Russians are like, nope, you're going to learn all the glorification in regards to all the history of Russia. So that's how Russia does it. Kind of give you a glimpse in regards to globally. When we're looking at Egypt, we're looking at sharp contrasts of industrialized nations. I'll spit it out. Most citizens work the land and care for the children. Little emphasis on formal schooling. Where their emphasis at? Land care and kids. If I can't keep my land care going and I can't maintain my food sources, then we're not around at all. So there's very little emphasis on school. Um, Poverty, obviously. Many children don't finish grade school. Grade school, guys. K through 6, you know. Even though education is free in Egypt. Hello, I'll go. I'll finish it. I'll do whatever out there, right? But there's very few qualified teachers. Well, why? Why are there very few qualified teachers? What was the first one I told you? They tend to land and care for the kids. So they're not getting an education, so who's going to teach the kids? Kind of a catch-22, right? 1/4 of the population is illiterate. That means they can't read or write. And reform is desired. In other words, there needs to be a change, but it's unlikely it's even going to happen. This is just part of the least industrialized nations when it comes to this. There's very poor supports when it comes to it. And I love this picture, by the way, because I'm like, oh, you know what? Good for her. She's trying. But the poverty of the least industrial nations carry over to their education systems. This was taken in West Africa. And I love it because these kids are so excited. They have their hands raised. What is she teaching? There's no textbooks. There's no chalkboard. There's no whiteboard. There's no computer. There's no. What is she teaching? Not only that, she's got her lovely kid hanging on her back. Right? Kind of interesting, right? When you put that spin on it. But if you look at it, she has a ruler in her hand. So is she teaching math?
No, she's probably. Is that like a way of
Whooping,
disciplining? Yeah.
whooping someone's butt, right?
Mhm.
Actually, I would say she's probably teaches math, believe it or not.
Oh.
But you know, it's general education though. It's one of those situations. But the kids are excited. Walk into one of our classrooms. What do they got?
Books.
For those of you who have little
Shoes.
kids still that might be in, you know, even in high school, but walk into a classroom. What do we have?
You have
Sleeping.
computers and books.
Bored-looking kids.
You
You know,
Mhm.
and this is where the hard part comes in because here they have no writing utensils. There's no
Mhm.
paper. Here we have all the writing utensils and paper that we possibly want,
Mhm.
but we force everybody to use a Chromebook,
Mhm.
This is
right?
true.
And half the time the kids that are on the Chromebooks are not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. Want me to tell you what they're doing? They're on YouTube.
Mhm.
I've seen it from my own eyes. But it's one of those situations where it's like you see this and they're trying to the best of their abilities. You know, and it's one of those things to where it's like I give her props. I mean, who knows what type of education she has. Obviously she's got an education in order to teach, but at the same time she's doing the best that she can. But this is like what our least industrial nation looks like for education, right? Kind of a scary aspect when you look at it that way. From a functionalist perspective, providing social benefits, what is the social benefit of education? Teaching our 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Reading, writing, and math, basically, right? Credential society, we have to have it. Even though we don't need it, we have to have it because certain jobs still require it. I know even like in my field, like for some of my therapists that work with me, in order to work in the school districts, you know, they have to have at least a high school diploma. For some of our funding sources that we work with, like, you know, like IHP and Magellan, those type of insurance companies, they require you to have something maybe even higher, like a bachelor's. You know, education is a key type factor, but our teaching knowledge skills for just basic purposes are just the reading, writing, and math. However, reading, writing, keyword there, writing. What writing is being done anymore?
Not much.
Kids
Lot of
don't even
typing.
learn cursive writing anymore.
No, they don't.
You know, I sat in an IEP meeting back in before all this kind of went away, and the mom's like, you know, my kid still needs to learn how to write. His writing sucks. I can't read it. And the kind of the school's response to that was, well, technically he really doesn't need to learn how to write anymore. He needs to learn how to type more.
Mm.
And the
That's
mom kind it's true, but if you think about it, okay, take away technology. You're at a job and your technology goes down. Are you expected to do nothing?
Mm.
Still gotta write. You gotta do something, or you might as well just go home. So
Yeah.
it's one of those situations. So she's like, and of course she's a nurse, so she works with doctors. She's all, doctors' writing suck. She's like, I work with them day in, day out, and she's like, and I refuse to have my son have that sloppy writing. So I give her props for kind of like standing her grounds with that, but at the same time, the school's right. Everything I do is on the computer. If the computer goes down, I'm kind of SOL. I'm completely out of luck. But it's one of those situations to where at the same time, I gotta learn how to spell. And how do you learn how to spell? You start off when you're a kid. You learn how to hold a pencil. You learn how to write your name. You learn how to do all that things. That's the basic writing they're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
When we're looking at culture transmissions of values, we're passing down our culture values. And this is where I kind of have a hard time swallowing, because what culture values get passed down through schools?
What-
If any.
values.
What was that?
No, I was thinking about what you just said.
Yeah, if you think about culture values, what are our culture values? We're talking about, our, you know,
Maybe history.
yeah, it's part of the history, but you're talking about those culture values. What passes down through school?
Spelling, grammar,
That's it.
yeah,
Not really.
writing.
No, not so much.
Nothing really else. But if you think about it, what are the kids learning in regards to culture-wise in school?
Maybe they learn about another cultures, like customs on another countries, like customs like in our country, but like values.
Yeah, but if you think if you think about it, they usually do. Um, um, I can't even think. They'll do like Martin Luther King Day. What do the kids learn about Martin Luther King besides coloring a picture?
Not so much.
Yeah, they don't really teach them that.
Columbus Day. Where do some of our values even come from? That type of things. Black History Month. Those things. What do they learn about it besides coloring pictures, reading some types of passages? They really don't know where they come from.
Mhm.
But that's passing down that culture value. That's passing off the information. And I don't know where that, I remember when I was in school, yeah, we had, Cinco de Mayo, we had a big thing, we had the maypole flower, we did all of that. But they don't do that anymore. I'm aging myself.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. But it depends on your teacher too.
It really does depend on your teacher. What the problem is, though, they have more loyalty to the states now.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that the curriculum per the state requirements come across. And the problem is with that, the state doesn't care about the cultural histories. They want you to know the requirements that you need to know. So that social integrity, that type of aspects kind of lost its value when you're looking at the transmissions values. Social integration, this is a key one. When we're talking about special needs and disabilities and that type of aspects, they used to go to a special school. They weren't allowed to be together within a general public population of a school. They were literally had their own schools to allocate to them, but they don't do that anymore now. And I think that this is where another issue of socialization and parents talking to their kids and kind of getting the aspects of that social integration again, of making sure that they understand that just because someone might be labeled as disabled or whatever the special needs might be, doesn't mean makes them any different. They still have a brain. They're still able to talk. They're still be able to communicate somehow, some way. It might not be the same way, but they're still able to communicate. It might be a little slower. It might be a little different, but that's usually why they've kind of changed. It's a process now. It's called mainstreaming, and the purpose of that is to help people become more part of a society at a regular school, to make them feel like they're still a part and not so separated. So when we're looking at both mainstreaming or inclusion, no matter which one you want to look at it, so mainstreaming or inclusion, it's basically referring to help the people to become part of a mainstream of a society. Because you've got to think about it, some of these kids, yeah, they are lower functioning, so they're not going to be able to go mainstream in a general education classroom. But they still get to generalize with the general public of that society of the school. So they may not be in the same classroom, but they may have lunch together and still have recess together. They still have that peer interaction, and that's key for kids. Um, so in this picture here kind of gives you a good example of that, and how the integration um, with the people with special needs, or disabilities, or whatever it might be, getting that peer interaction. And I think the more interaction you would get would stop so much of the labeling of disabled. Sorry, the labeling of disabled in regards to that aspects, because then they're more generalized, they're more social, integrated. Keyword there. Any questions so far? You guys
No.
good?
No.
Like, you can tell that's a heart of heart right there.
Yeah.
That tugs at my strings, because a lot of those kids get bullied a lot. So, and that's
Yeah, I
where
have a stepson. He's handicapped and he's a twin. So it is kind of cool because he actually is in junior high now. So he has classes with his brother. So it's good because he's able to interact, like you said, with the other groups. And the cool thing is they're starting to come out with sports activities more and more for these disabilities, to make them feel that, whatever dreams and accomplishments that they have, they can also
which sucks because they didn't get to
do
do
as
Special
well.
Olympics this
Maybe a
year.
little bit harder, but they'll be able to. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to, see that, because back in the day when I was younger, they really didn't offer that to kids.
No,
As
they
far
were
as
separated.
exactly, yeah,
They were separated, they were isolated, they were like, they may have been in the same school, but they were isolated to their own area, and they weren't allowed. They had different lunches and different time frames,
recesses.
different recesses, everything. So I mean, I remember that too. But that's one thing I always made sure with, even with my kids, when they were in high school and stuff like that, because they were part of the football team, and they cheerleading and stuff like that. And I always told them, I said, if I ever hear you guys ever bullying a kid, like, no, 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 and we're gonna go arounds. So it was always one of those things where they always partaked, or they made them feel a part, or they would invite them to certain things, and
Yeah,
just to make sure that they were feeling like they were included. And that's a lot of times with those the special needs, and or the ones that are disabled, they feel like they're being excluded.
Yeah.
They're forced to make them, they're almost forced to feel different, because that's just what they're labeled. So that's just why they kind of came up with this mainstreaming type aspects. And it takes a lot for a child. If they have severe behaviors, they're not allowed to mainstream. They have to remain in that single class, but they still get the social interaction through either recess or lunchtime. So at least they still get that interaction aspects, but they just may not be like in that general education setting.
setting, right.
So and when we're talking about gatekeeping, who remembers like gatekeeping? Or it's basically a process in which education opens and closes the doors for opportunities, and other terms of social placements, functions, and educations. um, and I remember, like the GATE program. There's so many programs out there that it's basically saying that you had a higher advantage from your class, so you were placed into like special classes and stuff like that. And it was supposed to give you better opportunities, because if you said that you're a part of this basically group, then it would open up more doors for you. That's what they're talking about. So it's that social placement. It's basically tracking the means of sorting the students on the basis of their abilities. When my kids were in elementary school, and it was up here in the high desert, and I love it, the elementary school actually tested all the kids, which I liked, and they didn't single in like, hey, you know what, you're in the slow group, and therefore you're on the lower end. No, they didn't do that. So what they did, they tested all like the fourth graders, and between all the fourth grade teachers, they split them up to where they were about at in education wise. So if you had like this group that was really far ahead and very knowledgeable and educated and stuff like that, they got put together, so that way the ones that were running at a lower pace didn't fall farther behind, because these ones that are excelled, and then the ones that were excelling didn't have to be held to a lower standard, because it was a fluctuation. So they kind of took the gatekeeping away for some schools, but I know the GATE program's still around. Avid, that's another one. Avid's around still for the high schoolers. That's that special placement. That's that special academic type aspects in regards to, sorting those students out from different, from their abilities, showing what they're successful in and what they're not successful in. And believe it or not, yes, school track, and we get into this in a little bit. Replacing family function, childcare, obviously we've talked about that. Schools kind of replace the childcare aspects, and unfortunately with some parents feel the school should be teaching them everything, including, sexual education. It's always a fun one.
Yeah.
I remember my high schooler, when I was in high school, I think it was a parenting class. I don't know what they called it. I think it was a parenting class that they called it, or sexual education class. The PE teacher taught it, and I still remember when he was going through certain processes and talking about like the female organs and stuff like that, his face turned 3 shades of red. Like, he got so embarrassed. And I'm like, dude, you're supposed to be teaching this class. Like, seriously, grow up a little bit, you know? But even nowadays, who talks to the kids about sexual education?
The teachers.
Mostly it's the school, I think. Yeah, it's
You have,
good.
as a parent, you have to sign a waiver.
At home.
Yeah.
It should be home.
Yeah.
I do.
We probably traumatized our kids. I know I did. I'm
I
sure we
do.
traumatized our kids. We started talking about sexual education when my kids were 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going to hear it from us and not your buddies and peers and everything else. You're going to hear the truth and the facts and how this is all going to work. I swear I probably traumatized my kids. But I'm like, I don't want you to go and hear it from your buddies. Like, oh, this is what's going to happen. No. You could correct them saying, no, my parents told me it was this. But if you think about it now, even when it comes down to educational class in regards to hygiene, a parent has to approve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the simple things. Hey guys, you know what? You're gonna hit puberty. You need to put some deodorant on. Do you really need a parent permission for that?
When
No,
they
Mom
did
and
that for
Dad,
my
you should be
daughter.
teaching them.
Yeah, when they did that
that's
for
right.
my daughter, she came back home and was like, they just taught me like everything you talked to me about, Mom. So I was
Yeah,
like, okay, good. It's like a review.
yeah. There you go. I hope they hit the basics that I did, and hopefully I give you
Yeah.
more. But it's like one of those situations to where it's like, okay, in reality, that's a parent's job. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, schools are replacing those family functions, and then families are getting upset because the kids aren't learning those true values. Like what the parent wants them to learn. Well, didn't teach them. So it's kind of one of those things. It's a catch-22. Like I said, I've heard just about anything and everything in IEP meetings, and I've heard parents talk and stuff like that. My kid comes here, what are you teaching them? Like, whoa, okay, well, what are you teaching them at home? So it's kind of one of those things. It's family function still needs to be a family function. Education needs to be education. There needs to be that line, but unfortunately, it's a very, very fine line, to where it's crossing now.
Mm.
So that's the functional aspects. Our hidden curriculum, our conflict, right? Our social inequality, right? How do we teach beyond the formal curriculum? Do we teach beyond the formal curriculum? No, we don't, right? State requirements, this is what I got to teach. I'm not teaching anything beyond it, right? Does that hinder a child?
It can.
It can,
Mhm.
right? Depending on
Sometimes.
we talked about it, depending on the teacher.
Mhm.
So if a teacher is very mindset, and I've seen some of these teachers too, and I give credit to teachers that are out there. By all means, they are not easy students. Not all of them are all perfect little angels in school. Junior high is the worst. Sorry.
Mhm.
They're trying to find themselves, and puberty's hitting, and they learn they got mouths. So junior high is always great. But if you think about it, when you're teaching beyond this formal curriculum, we're talking about those cultural values again. So that's where the kind of the hidden curriculum kind of comes into. It's basically the unwritten goals of schools, such as teaching obedience, authority, conformity, culture, all of those aspects. That doesn't get taught in school. Obedience, authority. There's zero respect for some of these students in schools in regards to their teachers. I've heard them curse their teachers out. Unfortunately, I have two of my kids, my son and my daughter-in-law, who are actual teachers, and
Wow.
yeah, I give them kudos because they teach at the high schools.
Wow.
So I applaud them day in, day out. And when they were getting their feet wet, they said they hated the junior highs. The kids had zero respects. Kids had zero respects. High school was a lot better. They understood that there was a consequence behind their actions.
Mhm.
So they kind of learned that aspects. But when you're talking about obedience, where is that learned?
It should be at
Should
home.
be at home.
Should be, right?
Mhm.
But have
Yeah.
you ever heard these kids talk to their parents?
Yes.
And it's like,
Mm.
are you gonna do something to that?
Crazy.
Like,
Mm.
like, hello, like you letting your kid like run the muck over you, like, hello. So that aspects is kind of they're expecting the teachers to do that, and that's not going to happen. Teachers don't discipline in schools. They don't.
No.
The worst thing they do is send them up to the office.
Right.
They might get suspended, or they might lose out on a fun activity, or that type of thing. But it's one of those situations. But reproducing the old class structure. I mean, I remember when teachers were allowed to smack you.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep. On the hand and hit the rulers on the hand and things of that nature. Oh yeah.
yeah, you get sent up to the vice principal's office, and get whacked with the ruler. I
Yeah.
remember
Mhm.
those days. That's really not that long ago. Nowadays, they're so afraid to even call a parent to say, hey, you know what, your kid's misbehaving.
Mm.
You know what, go to the office, go to this room for detention, and that's the end of it. What did that kid just learn?
So they
I
can do
could rule.
whatever they
And
want.
that they
They
can
can
continue
get
to do
away
it.
with everything.
Mhm.
They can do everything and continue to do it.
Exactly. No one can stop me. I'm the boss. So what authority did they just learn? I'm the boss. You're going to follow my rules instead of the other way around. I have my husband behind me laughing. But it's true. That's some of these kids. It happens. It starts like in first and second grade, unfortunately, and I've seen it. Some of these kids. I've been in a second grade classroom, and I've seen a kid curse out his teacher, calling her everything but a teacher.
Wow.
And then I'm like looking at him and going, "Wow!" I'm memorized, just like dumbfounded, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is coming out of your mouth." And he looks at me. He's like, "What are you gonna do to me?" And I'm like, absolutely nothing, because you're not my kid to worry about. So
Mm.
peace, be gone.
Yeah.
And the teacher's like looking at me like, help me, kick him out of your class. That's all I got for you. Kick him out.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things. He was a second grader.
But he had to hear
The
that language
language.
at home.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
extreme.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why I always say, you have to be careful how you speak to your children at home. And if you're cussing and carrying on and calling them all kind of names and things of that nature, they're going to go outside and do the same thing.
They carry it. They carry it all the way out and about. And
Mhm.
like I said, I feel sorry for some of these teachers. I said, my heart goes out to them. I give them kudos. I have two of them in my house. I give them kudos. Because
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I teach, but you know what? It's real easy. There's the door.
Mhm.
I don't have
That's
to deal with it. Bye.
mhm.
A little different when you hit the college level, but it's
And
one of those things.
before we go into a lot, I hear a lot of them now. The teachers were complaining before, but now that they've been home because of COVID-19, oh, they really see how bad little Johnny really is.
Yeah, I love the TikTok videos. I've been on TikTok a lot lately, and I saw a video of a dad going, "Whatever the teacher needs, I'm willing to give. You want a raise? I'll pay it out of my pocket. You want a tip? Whatever tip you want, I'll give it. Just take my kid back, please. I'm done." So
Mhm.
it's one of those things like, oh, you got a little bit more respect for your teachers now. So
Mhm.
it's kind of funny. But when we're looking at how where the conflicts and all that kind of come in, they are tilting the test and like discriminating by IQ.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is by keeping the social system intact, what they do is they have that hidden curriculum, but they use the IQ testing as a social system in regards to using it as a weapon of knowledge for the kids. A kid could be as smart as a wit, but it doesn't mean socially they know how to properly act. I see it firsthand all the time. But it's one of those things to where they also use the culture as a bias. to directly discriminate. And unfortunately, they look at it as like, okay, well, if you're this race and ethnicity, part of this culture, then your IQ is probably crap. That's not true. So they use this IQ test as weapons. And I don't know if you guys have gotten too far into the chapter or if you guys even started reading the chapter, but when you're looking at some of the questions that are in here, and then one of the questions is sympathy is to a composer as a book is to a what?
Author.
An author. That's because you read the chapter. But it's to an author. When you're looking at this in a general IQ aspects and you're talking about a general education, what kid's going to know that? What kid is going to know what a composer is if you're not teaching them in a musical organization type aspects? Right? Or if you, and I love this one, if you have 2 dice, regular standard dice, and 7 is showing on top, what's facing on the bottom? 7, snake eyes, boxcars, little joes, or 11?
I don't remember that one.
But they don't give you the answer to it, but I could give you the answer. Think of a regular dice system. Your regular, 6-sided dice.
I feel like
And
there is no 7.
there is 7, 5 and 2, 3 and 4, 6 and 1.
Hmm.
What's on the bottom of those dice? If you ever played with a lot of dice, if you have a 6 and 1 on top, you're going to have a 6 and 1 on bottom. If you have a 4 and 3 on top, you're going to have a 4 and 3 on bottom. The dice mimic it on the opposite sides of whatever number they're showing.
Oh.
So if you have a 5 and a 2, on the one with the 5, you're going to have the 2 on the bottom. The one on the 2, you're going to have a 5 on the bottom. It's always going to be 7.
Okay.
IQ test. How many of you knew that?
Yeah, I didn't.
No, I did not play with dice to figure that one out. But yes, it's one of those things to where if you think about the dice dynamics, that's how it works. So yeah, but they use this as a IQ as a weapon. So an intelligence test, what they do is they use it to keep the social class system basically just intact, to keep the upper class in the upper class, lower class in the lower class. Discrimination all day long, unfortunately, and it's kind of sad that it does exist and it does happen. So when we're looking at how do the schools stack the decks and how does the unequal funding come from? When we're looking at how schools funded, where do the funding sources go? And how do schools get funded? What funds them?
Federal government.
Federal government. For those of you who own houses, you pay property taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That type of aspects. That's where the funding comes from. So if you live in a nice, gorgeous, luxury area and your house is worth $1.2 million, you're paying some property taxes.
Well, those
Right.
schools are better off.
Those schools are better off. Now take a poverty-stricken area where the housing market's only $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
How much property taxes are being paid?
Not much.
Not much. So that's how the schools are funded, is basically on the surroundings of their schools. So richer communities obviously pay higher taxes. That contributes more towards the education. So it's stacking the deck basically against the poor. It makes it harder for the ones that are in those poor, poverty-stricken areas to get the funding they need to get the education they need. I know my husband and I, we ran across this lady at least once or twice within, I don't know how many years, but she's always at Best Buy around Black Friday time, and she does this out of her own pocket, and he probably won't even remember. But she literally bought, tablets for certain kids in her class that showed the most improvement through the year.
Mm.
And it would, because she taught 6th grade, so it was the ones that are, progressing and moving on. But she did this out of her own pocket, out of her own goodwill. And like I said, I'm sure he doesn't remember, but she was asking me, asking us actually in regards to, like, oh, what one would be the better one of the tablets, or, would you do a laptop, like a low-end laptop, or would you do a tablet? But I've seen her a couple of times since then, and I'm like, oh, she's back at it again. She's getting her students that are progressing and showing the most improvement to keep them motivated and keep them going, which then, you know, all the rest of the students that have heard about this, like in the younger grades, when they get her, they try to do their best to show that they can improve. And she's like, it ends up making a really good year in regards to, you know, testing and that type of aspects, because she's like, they're all pushing themselves to the max. But she works in a very poverty stricken school area, so she tries to do it. Parents, she said, even some of the parents didn't even have internet. That's how bad it was. So we're looking at parents' income and the quality of their child education, and we just had this huge, within the last year, outburst in regards to some of the famous actors and stuff like that, basically trying to pay for their kids' schooling and getting them into those high prestige colleges and that type of aspects. You could see that it does pay if a parent has more money. If a parent has less money, the less likely the child is to go to college. If someone with a higher income, it's going to be more likely for that child to go to college, because they're going to be more pushed to do it. But at the same time, at what cost? You know, mommy and daddy's pocket, because your kid may be the brightest bulb in the bunch. I don't know, you know, but all that circling of, you know, paying for people to take the SATs to make sure that their kids got the higher test scores to get them in those, you know, Ivy League schools like Harvard or whatever it may have been. That's all takes money, you know, and unfortunately, you know, in that type of aspects, that's kind of almost cheating the system at the same time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, not kind of, it is cheating the system.
Mhm.
But it's kind of one of those situations to where there is a consequence behind it. What was the consequence?
Jail, embarrassment,
Was it
scandal.
really embarrassment for them? Their degrees didn't get pulled.
You know, but what the parents did, I mean, it wasn't like, to me, you know, you checking you did something that wasn't true. You didn't tell the truth. You took false pictures, paid extra money for somebody to do it, and you took that opportunity from a deserving child that may have, you know, took the test and did it honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you took that opportunity away from that child and
Exactly.
falsified for your own. Mhm.
I mean, I know when I went to school, it wasn't easy. I did what I had to do.
Mhm.
You know, I by far didn't get handed to me. I had to work for it, and I think that's where that quality um, of parents' income kind of loses that value, because those kids with the parents' income, they feel like they're, well, my parents got money, I got it.
Mhm.
You know, no big deal. You know, if I don't do it, I could buy my way. They didn't earn it at all, but they have that mentality as, oh, we could just buy my way through.
Mhm.
I got it. No, you don't got it. You know, so it's like one of those things. But the fundamentally effective education when it comes to race and ethnicity as well. How many complete high school? Like I said, it's a mandatory thing now. So you're going to have a really high percentage in regards to that aspects. When you're talking about those who have completed high school, how many actually go to college, you can see the percentage just drop. But and I think this is where our education system kind of lacks, is not helping the kids understand that there is a source of free education available. You know, I know when I was in school, no one talked about FAFSA, no one talked about scholarships, no one talked about any of that. And I took AP classes when I was in high school, you know, but no one talked about those things to me. No one told me, hey, you know what, fill out your FAFSA form. And, you know, if you go to a junior college, you know, there's BOG waivers, there's this, there's that. No one told me that. And I can tell you right now, no one's telling these kids in high school now. The only thing they tell them is, oh, you need your SAT scores so that you can get into college. They tell these high school students you need your SAT scores to go to VVC.
Yeah.
VVC doesn't require SATs. So it's one of those situations to where, if I think a lot of the poverty-stricken areas, if they knew about the free education and that they didn't have to pay for anything out of pocket, I think that number would be a lot higher in regards to who continues into higher education
Mhm.
and going to college. So that's the conflict of things, is that lacks that hidden curriculum, as well as that there's that bias where they don't always tell everybody all those aspects. And I remember my mom, "Oh, you're going to college? Oh my gosh, it's so expensive." No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom that too. No, it's not. I got a big household. Well, my schooling's free when I was at VVC. Different story when you get into grad school and undergrad school and that type of stuff. But it's one of those things to where you make it work. Symbol of interaction perspective, teacher's perspective. The risks against research. They found that teachers tend to label their students just by the way they look. Label
Uh-oh.
affects, yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
the label affects people, right? And all their lives. And I laugh and I ask all my students this: do you think your professors label you as soon as you walk in the door?
Of course.
No, we don't. I don't. I mean, my thing is that you're in a college aspects, but when you're talking about elementary school, should it really matter?
Mhm.
No. I mean, if you come in with holy shoes on, I'm going to question, like, you know what, poor guy, do you need shoes? Let me help you out. I'm not going to judge, oh my gosh, you're never going to do your homework and you're going to suck in school. I'm not going to do that, right? But in some of these teachers do that. Don't put that past them. But it's applying that self-fulfilling prophecy as well. If you're going to label this kid, what is that self-concept? Well, if you're labeling me that I'm dumb, I'm dumb. If you're labeling me I'm never going to succeed and I'm always going to be in this poverty aspect, well, guess what? Why do I need to be here?
Yeah.
So those kids, they did this research, the risk research, and that's what they found, is that, children tend to be that way. But also found from about kindergarten to about fifth grade, when children have equal test scores, girls tend to test higher than boys. Well, if you're being biased and you're labeling, and I heard some teachers, oh my gosh, these boys are so loud, they're so this and this, that, da 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 da. What are you labeling them as? Troublemakers. So therefore, let me be the class clown. Why not? So it's one of those things to where, and I've seen teachers have their teachers' pets, and they're usually girls, to where, gives them that higher confidence and that higher self-esteem. So therefore they test better. So you can kind of see how the self-fulfilling prophecy can kind of help in regards to the test scores, in regards to who receives higher grades. Because if you're labeling right out of the gate, you got some issues going on out of the gate and already have problems.
Mhm.
So how do teachers' expectations work? Like I just mentioned, they do produce gender bias. Unfortunately, there is some serious gender bias, and I've seen teachers where boys are like raising their hand, like me, 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 and let that one little girl raise her hand, and they call on that one little girl, and it's like, dude, really? You got a kid that's excited, and it doesn't matter who it is. He's excited, and he wants to answer the question. Let him answer the question. you know so sometimes they do gender bias. They also do when it comes to even some like experiments or doing class activities, or helping out. If you notice, the girls will tend to get the more of the easier work to do, like, oh, here, pass out these papers, and then boys, here, carry the books. Producing that gender bias, right?
Mhm.
Producing race and ethnicity bias as well. Unfortunately, yes, there is the discrimination and the prejudice and racism that even comes from the teachers on some type of aspects, um, just based off of race and ethnicity. And it's sad that it happens, and it's sad that it occurs, and it shouldn't matter. Like I said, I'm Switzerland, so I don't care. It's, you're here for a purpose. You need to learn. So I shouldn't expect the exact same amount of work out of you, regardless of what your race and ethnicity is, regardless of what your gender is. But unfortunately, some teachers will have their favorites, and it shows. So that's where the bias kind of comes in at. So what's our problem in the U.S. education system? We have mediocrity, right? Mediocrity is what? Just the standard, nothing more, nothing less, right?
Mediocre.
Mediocrity, raising the standards. So how do we raise these standards? And how do we overcome, there's cheating within the school systems. Trust me, there's cheating within the school systems, violence, and we get into the violence aspects of it. And then the education needs a reform. But when we're looking at this and we're looking at the national results, and we're just talking about the SATs, right? From 1960 to present, verbal scores of the SAT have declined. Obviously, you can see. And it's still declining. In 1980, when it came to the SATs, if you notice, like in the 1960s, 1970s, they had really high scores. In the 1980s, they actually changed the SAT to make it easier. It's not as hard as it used to be. It is easier now. However, our lovely students still are scoring so low on the vocab, on the verbal side of things. Well, why? If we don't talk face to face anymore, and if we're LOLing through text and using abbreviations, what has our verbal done?
It's loaded because they're not using, words, not learning new words. They're using abbreviations. So can you spell? Can you read?
They're using that urban slang.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, the standard of the SAT on the verbal side of things, there's words on there the kids don't even know. So that's what's tanking the verbal scoring. Even math has actually increased again, but if you notice, it's taken a decline again. But I mean, it's one of those situations though, if you come across the question of how many goals are on a basketball court, and if you know sports, you're going to go, there's no goals on the basketball court. Right? But if you think about it, they want an answer. So what are you going to do? 0, 1, 2, or 3, or 4. But are there any goals? I would say 2 too.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're talking about an SAT, so you're like, okay, well, technically on a basketball court, there's no goals. There's 2 hoops.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to answer 2. What is accurate? So it's kind of getting into those tricky questions. The other one is how many halves are at a college game, basketball game? It's if you're a basketball person, you should know there's 2 halves. You have a halftime. There's 2 halves. I can ask you the same thing. How many quarters are in a football game?
4.
4, right? It's a more common of an answer. But yet, if I ask you how many points does a 3-point field goal to count for in a basketball game? Now I just combined basketball and football. There's no such thing as a 3-point field goal in a basketball game.
Oh.
These are your SAT questions.
Mm.
Good luck. Yeah, it is one of those things. When your tests seem to be more of those made to tricky type aspects, I learned a lot through like my grad school and stuff like that, but I also hated it at the same time, and that's the reason why I kind of refused to do true or false questions. I had, when I was in grad school, and I felt like it was kind of like the setup for a failure. When you have a test of, I think it was 50 questions, and 25 of them are true or false. Good luck. You got a 50-50 shot at passing the test. You missed 25, that's enough. You got half of them wrong, So it's kind of one of those things where that's when I became an instructor, I was like, no true or false questions. I don't like them personally myself. It's kind of, a tricky way to do an exam. I even had one exam, it was 10 questions, all of them were true or false. And all it takes is just that one little phrase to kind of offset you, but the same thing. I just read off, a field goal, how many field goals are in, for a 3-pointer in a basketball game. There's no such thing as a field goal. It's, a hoop shot, more or less. So how do we raise those standards in regards to making those expectations for overcoming that mediocrity for these students? Instead of just being at the state requirement, how do we push them above that state requirement? How do we get higher standards from our kids? But at the same time, what's the warning about that? There is a warning about that. If you think about it, if you're going to push your kids to be at a higher standard, you need to make sure your education systems can support it. because if your kids become a little bit smarter than your teachers, you're going to have a problem. If your teacher is just a mediocre teacher, and then now here that teacher is expected to learn at a higher standard, the teacher's not even going to be able to teach the student. So where does it start? Back to the teacher.
Qualified teachers.
Qualified teachers. And right now, if you go on to EdJoin and look, and I'm sure you'll probably see, emergency credential type aspects or credentials in progress. They're hiring teachers that either one are in their credential program, which that's one thing if they're in their program and depending on where they're at in their program. But at the same time, if you have somebody that's not even in their credential program teaching, that's kind of a scary aspect. And a lot of these teachers don't even have a bachelor degree.
I think the book also mentioned something about like lowering the test standards to like a 10th or 9th grade level or something like that because teachers weren't passing the tests.
Teachers can't pass the test. Teachers have to pass it. It's called the CBEST test, which is reading, writing, and math.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't pass those tests, then there should be no reason why you should be a teacher.
Yeah, and I think it said that they did so poorly, like they had to lower the standards on it.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty bad. But at the same time, I remember when I was in school, like I said, I was in AP classes. My classes were boring. How do you make it more fun? Make it worthwhile for these kids to want to get up at, before the sunrise and be at school as the sun's rising, for some of them, especially high schoolers. That's the reason why they did the vote in regards to no schools starting earlier than 8:30 in the morning. Because these high schoolers were sitting in class sleeping.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know what job doesn't start by 8.
I start at 6:30.
I start at 5.
Yeah.
4.
So what is that teaching? Once again, what is that teaching the student?
That the life is easier or accommodating.
Right?
When
It's more
it's not
accommodating.
true.
It's not
It's
true.
not true.
So it's
a
kind of like one
lie.
of those things to where it's like, okay, we're giving that false identification again, false, the social integrity type aspects. We want higher standards from these kids and we want them to know more, but at the same time, we can't produce it. So that's the reason why it's going to be very hard to overcome that mediocrity aspects. And then when we're looking at the cheating aspects, and they're cheating by the teachers and the administrators of the school systems, it's to make themselves look good, to ensure that they continue to get the funding that they need, the additional funding besides what the local area provides, but like the additional grant money. I was reading, what someone wrote in regards to the history first period senior year. It wasn't interesting in history in high school, and it's not. I hated high school, to be quite honest. So, but when we're looking at the cheating aspects of when we're looking at what the teachers do and try to improve their teaching aspects and their test scores, they don't want to look bad. So what a lot of schools do is they kind of keep 2 books. And this is where it kind of gets scary, is because like your book gave me a good example of like Mississippi keeps 2 sets of books. One set goes to Washington and reports grades, like the graduate grades rate is at 87%. But in reality, per their test scores, and they're true, that they keep on the campus, only about 63% should have actually graduated. But yet what gets sent off to Washington, D.C., 87% graduated. So who graduated that shouldn't have graduated? You have a big percentage there. So a lot of schools were doing this because they don't want to look bad. So they were kind of cheating their numbers in regards to that aspects. But the solution to this, if they get caught, there's a zero tolerance. There's a lot of fines and that type of aspects. A lot of administrators have lost their positions to where they could never teach or be in a school district again because of this cheating aspects. But at the same time, they're being pushed to overcome this mediocrity aspects. What do they do?
One one thing that I noticed, because like I really didn't do high school here, I did it
Mhm.
in my country, and I noticed that it's true on high school here, and I noticed that with my brother, he came to finish high school here. Like, let's say you don't do good on English, and you're kind of like struggling to graduate, and you graduate barely, like barely writing, like you struggle a lot, and you graduated from high school, and you get to college, and you have to take a bunch of English classes to be able to write at college level.
Mhm.
Which in my country, once you graduated from high school, you write to college level. You don't take more like writing classes, because technically you should be able to write like college level.
Mhm.
Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, it is, and like I said, it's one of those situations that I mean, even at like with VBC, we used to have English like 6, English 50, English
Mm-hmm.
90, English 101. Now you're just expected to jump into English 101.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody who's never been taught the proper way to do it, it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, oh, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
And it's hard, and the high school, the high school English teachers, they don't teach them anything,
It's
you
the
know.
school system.
It is the school system. I mean, your book
I have
gave
a
even good
question.
examples. Yeah.
I have a question. Are the schools required to be at a certain percentage in order to receive funding? Is that one of the reasons why they do the cheating as well?
Yeah, exactly. Because your book gave a good, perfect example. Like Arizona officials give their high school sophomores, mind you, this is 10th graders, right? A test covering the math of a sophomore should know. 1 out of 10 passed. You're talking a sophomore should know basic algebra. 1x plus 2x equals c. That type of aspects, or 1a plus 2b equals c. You need to be able to figure that out. It's been a while since I've done it. Actually, I was helping a student, one of my kiddos, through Zoom, just like this, with his math. The mom's like, I don't know how to do it, and I'm like, "Hoy, let me see if I can remember how to do it." We're talking about all these different aspects, and I'm like, it's been a while, but I remembered. I was able to get it out, but I was like, oh geez. I even looked over at my husband. Did I do that right? Did I tell him the right thing? Like, I still remember, but it was like one of those things. But there's zero tolerance for it. So what teachers are doing to kind of avoid the zero tolerance aspects, they're fudging the system. So, like Arkansas officials got their students out of high school by dropping the passing score to math to 24 out of 100. You score 24 out of 100, that's enough. But if you drop the score to make it a passing grade, are you fraudulently your books? No, you're just fraudulently your student at that point.
Yeah, because then you know what part is actually going wrong.
Mhm. Because like and then another one that was Washington D.C., a lot of their high school who graduated from high school, they operate about a 5th grade level. So when you're thinking about that and you're trying to overcome this mediocrity aspects, but then at the same time you're trying to make your books look good, you can kind of see where they're kind of forced to kind of cheat.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we can't have
That's
this
so
huge failing rate.
that's so scary because when I'm an old person, an old lady, that's the generation that's going to
That's
be
gonna be
ruling
taking care
over
of you.
us. Yeah, that's going to be taking care of us. That's pretty scary.
It is scary. That's why I tell my husband, I'm like, it's a good thing I know a lot of his students, because I told him, I said, if I ever see him in the hospital, I'll be like, hey, yeah, no. No offense, but no. I know what you got in chemistry. I'm good. No, not to be mean, but I'm good. But it's one of those things where I'm like, you always hear that old saying, oh, C's get degrees. I don't want somebody who got C's and got a degree and giving me my treatment. I'm okay. Just let me die at that point. No offense. So all you guys in there on the nursing side, push up the numbers. No
Okay.
offense. No offense. But when we're looking at violence, and I really didn't want to get into, well, I guess I can. Violence, this is surveillance camera of the Columbine High School. This was the big shooting that happened, It's been a while now. I want to say it was back in 2010, almost 10 years ago. Has it been that long?
I don't know.
It's somewhere around that time frame. It's been a while, if not longer. But this was a still surveillance like capture frame of it, as you know, you had the victims and everything else. Actually, does it say it? 98?
Yeah,
It was even
98.
longer. Oh my god,
Yeah,
it's even longer than that.
no,
I'm like, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has been. But when we're looking at the violence in schools and you hear about it through social media and you're hearing it through mass media, you hear about it consistently over and over and over again, and it makes it sound like the school violences have actually increased. However, over time, the social life of like the school shootings and all that, it's really a myth. The school shootings have gone down. The problem is that when it does happen, it is in a mass number, but at the same time, you don't hear of 50 different schools having a school shooting. It's usually just one school, and you have, you know, it is a massive event that ends up occurring. So the years of 92 to 2000, you can see there was 29 murders, and you can see from 2012 to 2013 you had another big number of 31. That's the Texas one that happened. There was the Texas A&M, was it Texas A&M, that had the school shooting. It was the college. So it's one of those situations to where, believe it or not, the actual myth of it is actually it's decreasing. It still occurs, but like I said, the numbers that end up murdered, unfortunately, is a higher number. So, but then you have like the mass media, and then you have social life, that type of aspects, to where parents don't want to send their kids to school. They rather homeschool them. They rather, you know, deal with them in regards to the aspects. But as you see, 2013, 2014, this was taken from May of 2017. So they didn't have 15, 16, 17, 18. But if you think about it, when was the last school shooting we had? All honesty.
I don't remember.
School shooting? Oh, like a few months ago. I want to say, wasn't there one like in San Bernardino or something?
I
That was
think
a
so.
year ago.
Oh,
I think
really? Wow.
It was one of the teachers' husbands.
Yeah, something like it was.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a year ago.
That has been a year ago.
Mm.
You know, but
I
beyond
will
that
say though,
one,
it makes me super paranoid. Like now that I see it all over.
and it
But
does. That's what people get afraid of. I mean, our way how our society is that people tend to not pay attention to the social cues. You're trying to tell me these kids didn't give any type of social cue of any type of disturbance?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, yeah, they did. Because if someone is in distress, depressed, whatever, they are going to look for any avenue for anybody to listen in regards to some type of aspects. The problem is that people don't listen. And so therefore it's like, fine, you don't want to listen to me? Here you go. I'm going to make you listen to me now. So a lot of times there's a lot of, you know, an issue of bullying. Maybe a kid was social bullied. Maybe there was a kid in regards to the aspects of not knowing how to handle himself. Maybe there's depression going on. They talk, they write, they do whatever. You just need to know what cues to pick up on. The more distant they get, the more you need to watch. So those type of aspects, those are high key for violence in schools. Um, and I know there was when we're talking like social media and bullying, and you know, there's cyberbullying even. It gets to the point to where it's ridiculous. Um, there was an incident in regards to it was a boyfriend girlfriend situation where the boyfriend, I guess they broke up, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill myself, da 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 da. He was doing it through text, and his ex-girlfriend's like, you know what, I'm tired of hearing it, just do it.
Mhm.
Well, guess what, he did it.
Yeah,
um,
she got arrested.
yeah, she got arrested for it, for basically for murder, because she told him to do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we're looking at it, you know, there is a documentary on that as well, you know, in regards to how cyberbullying can to really affect on an individual. like someone just mentioned too, like a bunch of the broad and very usable facts. I remember even my son, like, Mom, I remember when I was in high school, economic wise, they didn't never teach me how to maintain a checkbook. He's like, I think that's more usable than, our economic status in regards to why our economy sucks. And I'm like, well, it kind of goes hand in hand, but they should have showed you at least something useful in regards to that aspects too. But it's one of those things, like, when it comes to school shooting and exploding that myth, the social media is the one that explodes that myth. Oh, there's more school shootings, there's more this, it's dangerous to send your kids to school and that type of aspects. And it's rough and it's hard. But in reality, like I said, when's the last time it happened? It's happened over a year ago. In regards to that.
Last school year, there was like a knife found with a threatening note in the campus, and there were blades.
VVC
So
had
they
one.
closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was an elementary school,
Yeah.
and they closed it down for a couple of days. But even just allowing her to go back, or me feeling comfortable with her going back, was hard
Yeah.
because you just don't know, and
Yeah.
you see all of that on the media, so it just makes it more apparent.
It makes it hard. Well, just like with us at VVC, we had the same thing. We had the same thing in aspects in regards to, someone not wanting to do their finals.
Yeah.
Putting a threatening message on the bathroom wall because, they didn't want to take finals. Well, that's a violence type of aspects. Here I had a husband who was locked in his classroom with his whole class.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yeah, it's scary.
Hey, baby.
They're saying hi. You want to say night-night? Put her all in a good mood. She was whining a few minutes ago. See? But yeah, it's one of those things to where like the social media can make it so outblown and out of proportion to where it's like, oh my gosh, there's all these school shootings going on, and it's one. Is one good? No, one's not good. We don't need any. But if the criteria of what is required in the schools and making it more fun and not so aspects of so rigid and boring, you won't have the aspects of kids wanting to have other things to do, like bullying everybody else and being disruptive or having all these behaviors and that type of everything else. So do you guys, if you notice, I stopped on religion like I said I was going to. Do you guys have any questions on chapter 13 so far?
No,
No.
not yet.
I think I pretty much covered all the study guides so far. I don't think I missed anything.
Mm-mm.
This one's pretty spread out. Let me